Runeterra is a world absolutely brimming with magic. The power of the arcane exists all over the place, in many different forms. Those dedicated to studying and wielding magic are, of course, referred to as mages. But even the most accomplished mage can only achieve so much. In the world of Runeterra, there are several different magical disciplines. Some seem directly opposed to one another, while others have notable degrees of overlap. With so many different potential power sets spread across an equally diverse roster of characters, it's little wonder that Riot would make more of an effort to try and make them more visually distinct from one another. One of the primary ways they've done this is, of course, through the use of color. However, even a rainbow only has so many options to offer, so Riot has had to get creative when they inevitably end up having to reuse some colors for different things. Perhaps the most obvious example is the use of the color blue. In many fantasy settings, blue tends to be the color most associated with magical energy, and Runeterra is no exception. Blue is the color of mana, which is arcane power in its purest, rawest form, at least as far as we understand it. The two most obvious examples of characters who wield pure mana are Rise and Zareth, the latter of whom is literally made of this stuff. That said, we see magical blue energy coming from plenty of other sources as well. It's what courses through Hextech and Piltover and animates creatures like the Blue Sentinels of Targon. Ezreal's Gauntlet also allows him to create constructs of pure mana, though it's also been known to produce golden yellow energy as well. We'll get back to that later. Pure mana isn't the only thing associated with vibrant azure hues, however. In the world of Runeterra, spirits and souls are also often depicted as having a bright blue color. Perhaps this can be seen as a subtle way of suggesting that souls are, at their core, comprised of pure mana. That may be worth an entire video unto itself. Granted, blue isn't the only color associated with souls and soul magic. Necromancy has the tendency to turn souls a sort of sickly green color, which may serve as an indication of the magic's perverse and corruptive properties. Spirits forcibly bound to the living world show their unnatural properties on their sleeve, which does raise a few interesting questions about karma, come to think of it. Mind you, green is also associated with another type of magic, namely that of time. Chronomancers like Zillion and his followers are shown to wield a more vibrant emerald green power when messing around with time's flow. Although Echo, who harnesses time through technology, has more of a greenish blue thing going on. Perhaps that's a result of combining temporal energies with Hextech. Then again, there's also Zeri's green lightning, which, honestly, I'm not even sure what to make of that one. Another prominently featured color in League's roster is purple. This tends to be most often associated with the Void and the creatures residing within it. Specifically lavender, as Bel'Veth refers to her domain as the Lavender Sea. Mind you, I've always seen the Void as slightly more of an indigo, but technicalities. Of course, there are other examples of purple being used for non-Void champions. Dr. Mundo is probably the first example that comes to mind. His skin was turned purple through the use of the same chemicals that made him appear so monstrous. And while it's not hard to confirm, I think it's reasonable to assume that Mundo has some variant of shimmer running through his veins, given Riot's insistence on prioritizing Arcane as the main canon now. Morgana is another example, with her magic revolving primarily around purple fire. This is mostly to set her apart from her sister, who uses golden flames, representing the disparity between the two, light and dark and all that. Xayah also uses purple magic to contrast Rakan's gold, although in that case they're more so meant to complement each other as an opposites attract sort of situation. Another character with an association with purple would be Syndra. Her magic is, well, it's honestly pretty vaguely defined. I've touched on this before in my Let's Talk About episode for her, but Riot has never been super clear on what Syndra's powers are actually supposed to be. The most likely answer is some form of gravity magic, given how she primarily picks things up and throws them around, and her orbs could be seen as semi-solid black holes. Yes, I know that's not at all how black holes work, but it's magic. That said, she evidently also has the power to drain life energy from things, which is. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that, so let's just move on. Next up is red, which is most commonly associated with blood magic. Not much to explain there. That said, red also tends to have an association with demons in Runeterra. Although demonic magic tends to be primarily black with tinges of other colors mixed in. Fiddlesticks is black and red, Nocturne is black and blue/purple, depending on what artwork you want to consider canon, and Evelyn is black with pink. Demonic associations with the color black do tie in rather nicely to the idea that shadow magic is heavily connected to them, but again, that's a whole other video. Next up is yellow/gold, which is probably the most inconsistent when it comes to theming. Gold and yellow is heavily associated with celestial magics, like as we mentioned with Kale earlier, though Bard and Soraka also seem to wield golden energy as well. Azir and his Sandweavers also use golden magic for their craft, likely to reflect the glistening dunes of the desert. Meanwhile, Set and Rakan both use a vibrant yellow energy for their magic. While their power seems to be a form of spirit magic, it seems almost like a more emotionally driven form of the power, like it's fueled by raw passion. That's just speculation on my part, though. Of course, all of this is just scratching the surface. There are dozens of different kinds of magic in Runeterra, all with a variety of different colors associated with them. Perhaps too many to reasonably tackle in a single video. But what is the point, you may ask? Well, honestly, I just think it's interesting. As I've said in prior videos, I have a rudimentary understanding of color theory at best, so I may not be the most qualified person to talk about this sort of thing. That said, I do find color-coded power systems to be a fascinating topic. They're a bit of a double-edged sword, in a way. On one hand, they help add visual variety between what would otherwise probably just be generic energy blasts, creating association in the viewer's head with, oh, this kind of color means it's associated with this kind of power, and so on. On the other hand, there's only so many colors one can feasibly work with in the spectrum, so saying red means this or blue means that as a rule can create unintended consequences down the road. I mean, there are people out there, for example, speculating that the shimmer we see in Arcane is somehow void related just because it's purple. Others have complained that Mordekaiser being blue in LOR just makes him look too much like Xerath. Allegedly, this was done to set the Iron Revenant and his soul slaves apart from the Ruin King and his Myths raids, but yeah, it kinda backfired. So, I suppose the main takeaway from all of this is that, like many things, color is a detail that many creators often take for granted. It's not something people usually tend to think all that hard about when building a fantasy world, but perhaps it should be. Anyways, that'll be all from me for now. Until next time, stay bright.